A night of chaos in Melbourne. One man shot and 4 people attacked in separate incidents outside Flinders Street Station. Search crews stood down as the mystery deepens over the disappearance of a missing Victoria woman. Two former Prime Ministers declare victory as votes are counted in Pakistan's election.
Gets inside it. That is a class shot from David Warner. He moved early.
And David Warner drives Australia to victory in the first T20 international against the West Indies. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley. A man has been charged over an incident in Melbourne's CBD which resulted in 4 people being taken to hospital. Meanwhile, in a separate incident, a man allegedly armed with broken glass was shot by a protective services officer. Nicholas Hines reports.
There were quite dramatic scenes here right in the heart of Melbourne about 5:30 yesterday afternoon. One of the main thoroughfares closed off, Swanston Street closed, on Prince's Bridge near Flinders Street Station as emergency services responded to the incident. Police saying that 2 protective services officers who normally patrol Melbourne's train stations were supporting police as they responded to an incident when these 2 PSOs encountered a man armed with broken glass. They tried to subdue him using pepper spray. Apparently that had no effect. So then one of the PSOs shot him, inflicting non-life-threatening injuries. Police say that the man has been taken to hospital. So the actual incident that the PSOs were supporting the police in the response to was happening at the same time. Obviously, police were called to the tram stop there because a man had allegedly boarded a tram and attempted to rob 2 people on board. And then when police arrived, the man allegedly assaulted 4 people on board with a glass bottle as well. That man has since been arrested. The 4 people who were assaulted were all taken to hospital yesterday, all suffering non-life-threatening injuries. The man, a 27-year-old South Melbourne man, has since been charged with 4 counts of recklessly causing injuries. He's been remanded in custody. Police say both incidents are being investigated, neither related to terror, and there's no wider concern for the community. And they say that the incident involving the PSO shooting a man will be investigated by the Armed Crime Squad with oversight from the Police's Professional Standards Command.
The search for missing Victorian mother Samantha Murphy has been drastically scaled back almost a week after she was last seen. Jesse Thompson reports from east of Ballarat.
The Wurruk'urrung Regional Park was earlier this week one focus of the enormous search efforts to find the missing mother of 3. This morning, apart from a few locals who are still out here searching, it's mostly empty. That's because late yesterday, police confirmed that some of their officers, as well as volunteers from the SES and the CFA, had been temporarily stood down after the enormous search effort combed through a lot of dense bushlands to Ballarat's east and to its south. The other major development is that police have now officially handed carriage of the investigation to their missing persons squad, a specialist team from Melbourne. That means the scope of the inquiry will be broadened to specifically look at the days leading up to Samantha Murphy's disappearance. Police are also working with telecommunications company to try to access any data that may come from her phone or the GPS-fitted watch that Ms Murphy had on her when she set out for that run last Sunday. It's coming up on a week now, though, since the mother of 3 was last seen, and police have repeatedly emphasised that they have significant concerns for her welfare. They say, though, that so far there's no evidence to suggest anything sinister or any foul play, and so at this stage the homicide squad is not involved.
The parties of 2 former Prime Ministers have both claimed victory in Pakistan's national election, despite no formal result being announced. Independent candidates backed by jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan have a clear lead so far, according to the official tally. And Khan's party has released an AI-generated message from him claiming a landslide victory. But Nawaz Sharif has declared a win to his supporters, despite also acknowledging his party doesn't have the numbers to form a government. Sharif's party is backed by the nation's powerful military, which is accused of leading a crackdown on his political rivals. South Asia correspondent Meghna Bali reports.
You know, many people call this election a foregone conclusion, an easy win for Nawaz Sharif, a man who's been Prime Minister 3 times before and appeared to have the backing of Pakistan's powerful military. Instead, what we've seen emerge is a powerful cohort, a group of independents mostly backed by Imran Khan and his party PTI, and they've become the single largest group to win seats in this election. Now, it's particularly interesting because of the number of hurdles thrown their way. You know, their charismatic leader, former cricketer Imran Khan, behind bars, sentenced in 3 separate cases and disqualified from running in this election. You know, they were denied the use of their election symbol, the cricket bat, particularly important in a country with such high rates of illiteracy. And the party has claimed that authorities have cracked down on them, banning them from rallies, banning them from putting up posters and forcing them to go underground and fight as independents. You know, this election has been described as one of the least credible in Pakistan's history. And that's because of these mass internet shutdowns, delays in polls and slow results. And it's led to suspicions of vote rigging in favour of parties backed by the military. What we know is that this result was not expected. And it'll be interesting to see what this new cohort does in Parliament. You know, will they work with the new government, or is Pakistan headed towards yet again another period of political instability?
The White House is hitting back at criticism of Joe Biden, describing a report into his handling of classified material as inaccurate and inappropriate. The investigation cleared the president of criminal charges, but was critical of his conduct and his memory. North America correspondent Jade McMillan reports.
This should have been a moment of some relief for Joe Biden after an investigation into how he handled classified documents after leaving the vice presidency found that he shouldn't face any criminal charges. But it's the detail in this report, the language that is used in a lengthy document from a special counsel for the Department of Justice, that is causing the president all sorts of political problems. This report makes the claim that Joe Biden would present to a jury as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. It alleges that he couldn't remember in an interview with investigators key dates like the beginning and the end of his vice presidency, or even to within a few years when his son Beau died. Now, it was that assertion that really appeared to upset the president. He held an unexpected evening press conference at the White House last night. He defended his conduct, he defended his memory, and he said that when he was asked about his son, he felt as though it was none of the investigators' business. He has been backed up by some of the members of his administration today, including his Vice President, Kamala Harris.
The way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated, gratuitous. And so I will say that when it comes to the role and responsibility of a prosecutor in a situation like that, we should expect that there would be a higher level of integrity than what we saw.
The special counsel in this case, Robert Hur, was at least at one stage a registered Republican. He was appointed to one of his previous positions by the former President Donald Trump, but he was also chosen by Joe Biden's Attorney General to lead up this inquiry. The president is 81 years old at the moment. He would be 86 by the end of a second term. And so this report is really being used by his political opponents as further ammunition in their argument that he isn't mentally fit to be in the White House. We've heard from Republicans in Congress and also Donald Trump making that claim. Those lines of attack will only be ramped up as we get closer to the presidential election in November.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has told the military to develop a plan to evacuate civilians from Rafah to make way for an expanded offensive. Of the 2 million people who live in Gaza, more than 80% are now displaced, and the majority have headed to the city of Rafah near the Egyptian border. The Palestinian authorities say that 2 years ago the population of Rafah was about 260,000, but an influx of people since the Israeli strikes means the population has grown to 1.4 million.
Israel bombed Rafah again. A family ran to get medical aid for a child who was already dead. Around 1.2 million Palestinian civilians have crammed into Rafah. Jabba al-Budini said thousands more would be killed if the Israelis moved their troops in. The kids can't sleep, he said. They're terrified, and so are the adults. Hunger and illness are spreading in makeshift camps flooded with pools of sewage. The lines of plastic tents go on for miles. The aid operation is led by UNRWA, the beleaguered UN agency for Palestinian refugees. It says an Israeli offensive into Rafah would have terrible consequences.
Such a military operation would add an additional apocalyptic layer in the Gaza Strip.
Apocalyptic, that's a very strong word.
It is a strong word, but if you talk about already 5% of the population having been either killed, either being missed or injured, and then you conduct a military operation in this place, you can only add an additional disastrous layer of tragedy, and this needs absolutely to be avoided.
UNRWA has sacked a dozen employees Israel says took part in the 7th of October attacks. After 4 months of war, the stresses are very evident. There are the very serious allegations hanging over this agency, UNRWA, who are the main provider of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. And there is Israel's seeming determination to extend the military offensive into the town of Rafah, despite the opposition of its most important ally, the US, who say that innocent civilians have suffered enough. Those comments will only deepen the suspicions of UNRWA among government supporters like retired General Uzi Dayan, former deputy head of the armed forces.
UNRWA is a terror organization. We will find a way with our civil administration to give the people medicine, food, etc.
So
but we don't want...
That's an occupation.
That's... The other possibility is to give it back to the Hamas and UNRWA and to face again another 7th of October. We will never agree to it.
He went off to join protesters, mostly religious nationalists, whose views on Gaza are shared by many, if not most, Israelis, urging the government to ignore its critics, including the World Court, which is investigating plausible accusations, it says, of genocide in Gaza, as well as Joe Biden. One of the placards said, "It's simple, them or us."
Foreign Minister Penny Wong has warned a major conflict in the Indian Ocean region will cause massive disruption to the world economy. Delivering the keynote speech at the region's premier conference in Perth, Senator Wong highlighted so-called grey zone threats, activities that stop short of military action. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts has further details from Perth.
Obviously, the government's been very focused on its key priorities in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. They're the major, focus points for the government. But the Indian Ocean is part of the government's broader strategy. And right now, there is quite a bit of focus on the Indian Ocean. Now, unlike other seas that we see, like the South China Sea, for example, where there's the constant threat of conflict and often nations bumping up against one another with overlapping claims, the Indian Ocean has remained pretty peaceful. But there is a risk that could change, particularly as India and China engage in an ever fiercer arm wrestle for diplomatic ascendancy there. We've seen, for example, diplomatic arm wrestles between India and China in nations like Sri Lanka over whether Chinese vessels should be allowed there to conduct research. India suspects that China is using those research vessels to basically map out the ocean floor in a way that it could use in a future conflict with India, particularly for its submarines. And it's also building up close relationships with some of India's near neighbours. Now, all of this makes the region quite a bit more combustible. New Delhi has accused Beijing of using opaque lending to build up its influence and to try and undermine India. Australia shares some of those concerns, but what it's trying to do at the moment is just try to build up as many rules for the region as possible. And the way it's doing that at this conference here in Perth is just by sitting down with foreign ministers in this effort co-hosted with India to talk about what those rules should be and how they might possibly be enforced.
Stephen, what do you think the main message was that the Foreign Minister wanted to get across?
Well, there were a couple. The first one, I think, was just the catastrophic impact that any conflict in the region might have. That's assuming, of course, it doesn't escalate to something horrendous and unimaginable like a nuclear conflict. But any disruption, as Senator Wong pointed out last night, to trade in the Indian Ocean would have devastating global consequences economically. We've already seen, of course, what's happening in the Red Sea. Large amounts of the world's oil go through the Indian Ocean at the moment from the Middle East. Huge numbers of container ships go through as well. So any disruption from either crime or perhaps more realistically some sort of grey zone conflict or worse, open conflict between great powers or perhaps between India and China could have a devastating impact. And Senator Wong has also warned against things that India has warned about without naming China directly, talking about the risks of foreign interference and opaque lending practices in the region. Let's take a listen to what the Foreign Minister had to say.
The prosperity, peace and resilience we seek are being seriously challenged. Food, energy are in increasingly short supply. More people are displaced, more conflict risks and costs lives.
OK, so what have other regional leaders had to say?
Well, we heard from quite a few late yesterday, including the President of Sri Lanka. We also heard from the foreign ministers of both India and Singapore, among others. With India, again, there's a lot of common ground with Australia, even when China isn't directly named. You heard Dr. Jaishankar, India's foreign minister, talking about dubious, choices made by some countries in the region and the threats posed by opaque lending. Singapore, it's a slightly more of a balancing act. Their main preoccupation is simply to ensure that container traffic continues to flow through the Indian Ocean because they're so dependent on trade. So they're simply urging all countries to really ratchet down the tensions and try and find a modus vivendi that would work for everyone. Sri Lanka, well, that was an interesting speech from the President, Wickremesinghe. He essentially said that as the great power competition intensifies, and for him that includes India as well as China and the United States, small states like Sri Lanka have, as he put it, a shrinking space for manoeuvrability. So they've just got less choices that they can make as they try and navigate a path between these big players. So it's a really interesting time in the Indian Ocean, Lorna, and pretty timely for this conference.
Across Australia, Asian communities are celebrating the Lunar New Year. And in Brisbane, thousands have gathered at events across the city to ring in the Year of the Dragon.
Rolling, pinching and precision folding. In Benny Lamb's busy kitchen in Brisbane South, he's preparing a colourful feast to welcome in the new year.
Chinese New Year on the Year of Dragon, always really excited for Chinese family because it's sort of a really good reason to bring the whole family back together.
This year's festivities in Brisbane also feature immersive artworks which shine a light on stories from Asian and migrant communities.
Hearing all their different stories and sort of seeing all the similarities when you kind of think all these experiences will be quite different, but they're actually quite similar, and then it just makes you feel a lot more connected to the greater community.
The handmade kites connecting more than just the cultural ties between Brisbane and Asia.
Part of my thinking is the project would hopefully open up so that people can understand other perspectives of life.
These cheeky dragons getting up close and personal.
We usually come and watch the dragon dance, the lion dance, and we get together as a family and have a really nice dinner.
This year is the Year of the Dragon, which brings power, leadership and luck in Chinese culture.
But unlike Western New Year's celebrations, the party doesn't just last one day. The festivities are expected to continue well into next week.
新年快乐!
Ariana Levy, ABC News, Brisbane.
The Australian desert is a long way from the bright lights of professional American sport, but one aspiring US baseballer is spending his off-season in Alice Springs. It's a surprise addition to the amateur competition, but comes as the sport continues to grow in popularity here in Australia.
Blake Whitney has seen bigger fields and better batters, but he's revelling in the outfields of the Outback.
Wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been awesome.
The rookie, who is under contract with the Chicago Cubs as a relieving pitcher with their minor league sides in America, was drawn to Alice Springs for more than a game, travelling to be with his wife, who now works in the town.
She's been making sacrifices to follow me for all these years. I felt like, I had to do it for her.
The Cubs are valued at more than $6 billion, with some players earning tens of millions of dollars a year. But Whitney says he's more in touch with the amateurs stepping into the diamond down under.
Because back home it's a job, and like everybody else, you go to work and you do your job, and it's serious. But out here, I feel like a little kid again. It's a great time.
The marriage between an aspiring professional and a grassroots competition proving the perfect pitch, with youngsters able to lean on Blake Whitney's expertise so they can chase their own American dreams.
I've been getting pitching lessons from Blake, and he's helping me learn new pitches and get my throwing action right.
Organisers say the sport is now attracting more local players too.
We're currently sitting at 335 registered players, which was a 29% uplift in 2023, so we're growing quite quickly across there.
Growth of the game being hit out of the park and beyond. Miles Holbrook Walk, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Well, let's catch up with the rest of the sport now. Here's Daniela Intili.
Australia has won the first of 3 T20 international matches against the West Indies by 11 runs in Hobart. Captain Mitch Marsh played despite testing positive to COVID-19, but it was David Warner who starred in his 100th T20 international. The veteran opener top scored for the hosts, smashing 70 runs off just 36 deliveries, as Australia posted a total of 7 for 213 to equal the record international T20 score at Bell Reeve Oval. The Windies were then restricted to 8 for 202, with Australian spin bowler Adam Zampa claiming 3 for 26. The two sides meet again tomorrow in Adelaide, with Australia looking to wrap up the 3-game series.
Yeah, look, it's just pleasing to get the win on the board, but you obviously quite clearly there saw there's a nice wicket to bat on, and you've got to make the most of those ones. They're the ones you don't want to miss out on.
Good to be back with the group.
Yeah, it is. It's great. I feel refreshed. A lot of energy. The guys have told me to settle down a little bit, but yeah, look, I'm pumped. I said I wanted to play the 2020 World Cup and finish there. And
Adelaide United have snatched a thrilling point in the A-League men's to clinch a 3-3 draw with Perth Glory at Hindmarsh Stadium. The hosts led 2-0 in the first half, but Glory hit the front through Josh Rawlins in the 81st minute. The Reds missed a penalty moments later, but trailing 3-2 deep into stoppage time, 18-year-old defender Pana Kikanaka scored the equaliser in the 98th minute and his first A-League goal. In the A-League Women's, Western Sydney Wanderers came from behind to beat Newcastle 2-1 in Bathurst. Libby Copus-Brown opened the scoring for the Jets with a stunning strike, but Sophie Harding equalised just before half-time with her 9th goal of the campaign. Defender Vicky Bruce fired the winner in the 78th minute to break a 2-game losing streak and move the Wanderers back into the top 4. The Brisbane Bullets have thrashed Adelaide 102-84 to move to 4th on the NBL ladder. Nathan Sobey finished with a career-high 37 points in his 261st game. DJ Vasiljevic top-scored for the Sixers on 28 points. The Bullets now need to win their next match to secure a place in the playoffs. Brisbane will snap a 5-year drought if they beat the Breakers in Auckland in next week's final round.
Yeah, I mean, my teammates put the ball in my hands to make plays and set great screens and get me open a lot of the time. So there's a lot of that goes into it. And then obviously what Justin's running, really embracing what he's bringing in for this season.
Meanwhile, in Auckland, the New Zealand Breakers clinched a thrilling 88-85 win over the Illawarra Hawks. Breakers guard Parker Jackson Cartwright finished with 31 points, 7 assists and 4 rebounds. Both teams have 3 games to play over the next 9 days to determine the top 6 finishers. Retired Australian swimming champion James Magnussen could face potential legal and ethical issues after declaring he'll take banned drugs in an unofficial attempt to break the 50-metre freestyle world record. The 32-year-old former world champion will come out of retirement to compete in the enhanced games where doping is allowed. The two-time Olympian will be paid $1 million to make the attempt at the steroid-driven games, which would not be subject to world anti-doping rules. Magnussen was confirmed as the first athlete set to compete in the proposed competition, which has been criticised by the Australian Olympic Committee and the UK World Anti-Doping Agency.
Looking around the country in Queensland, heavy showers and warm in the southeast, late showers and very warm in the north, mostly sunny in the southwest. To New South Wales and the ACT, showers and mild temperatures in the north and southeast, sunny and very warm in the southwest, mostly sunny and very warm in the northwest. For Victoria, mostly sunny and cool in the southwest, windy and cool in the southeast, sunny and very warm in the northwest and northeast. To Tasmania, mostly sunny in the south, windy on the highlands, mostly sunny and cool in the north. To South Australia, mostly sunny in the southeast, sunny and very warm in central parts, sunny and warm in the north and west. In Western Australia, sunny and hot in the southwest and south, very warm and sunny in the northwest, showers in the northeast. And in the Northern Territory, warm temperatures and showers in the north and over the interior, a late shower and hot conditions in the south. Looking ahead to tomorrow's forecast for the capital cities, in Brisbane, partly cloudy with a high chance of showers. Cloudy in Sydney, Canberra, partly cloudy. Sunny in Melbourne, mostly sunny in Hobart and Adelaide. Sunny in Perth and partly cloudy with a high chance of showers for Darwin. Before I leave you this hour, there was a fair bit of commotion at last night's Pink concert in Sydney, with one fan leaving the show with more than just a T-shirt.
There's a baby. Somebody's having a baby? Oh, God.
The American singer stopped her show at Sydney Football Stadium after concertgoers began waving from the crowd to signal that an expectant mother had gone into labour. A medic helped the woman and she was taken out of the mosh pit in a wheelchair, waving to the crowd. That is the latest from ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley.